श्रीमंत छत्रपति शाहूजी महाराज, श्री प्रताप पवार, चेयरमैन सकाल मीडिया ग्रुप, श्री श्रीराम पवार, एडिटर डायरेक्टर, श्री निखिल पंडितराव, एक्झिक्युटिव्ह एडिटर आणि सकाल मीडिया ग्रुपचे सगळे अधिकारी, कोल्हापूर मधले सगळे सन्माननीय नागरिक, NCC चे कॅडेट्स जे इथं सुद्धा उभे आहेत आणि पाठीमागे सुद्धा बसलेले मला दिसत आहेत, बंधू आणि भगिनीनो, माझ्या पत्नी आणि माझ्यातर्फे आपल्या सर्वांना सप्रेम नमस्कार आणि जय हिंद. आम्हाला कोल्हापूरला नेहमीच यायचं होतं आणि शाहूजी महाराज जेव्हा दिल्लीला आले होते आणि आमची भेट झाली होती तेव्हा सुद्धा त्यांनी आम्हाला आमंत्रण दिलं होतं की कोल्हापूरला जरूर यावं, पण या त्या कारणामुळे ते काही घडू शकलं नाही. त्यामुळे मी सकाळ ग्रुपचा आभारी आहे की त्यांनी मुख्य पाहुणे म्हणून आज इथं या प्रोग्राममध्ये बोलवलं आहे आणि याच निमित्ताने आम्हाला कोल्हापूर शहर सुद्धा, सुंदर शहर सुद्धा बघायला मिळालं. मी एकदा परत शाहूजी महाराज आणि सकाळ मीडिया ग्रुप आभारी आहे की त्यांनी आज बोलवलं आणि हा सन्मान दिला मला मुख्य पाहुणे या प्रोग्राममध्ये. असा कार्यक्रम सकाळ कोल्हापूर एडिशन 42nd ॲनिव्हर्सरी च्या निमित्ताने साजरा केला गेला आहे आणि कोइन्सिडेंटली मी सुद्धा सैन्यामध्ये 42 इयर्स होतो. सकाळबद्दल जास्ती काय बोलायची गरज नाही, पण मी हे नक्की म्हणू शकतो की सकाळ ते कन्स्ट्रक्टिव्ह आणि रिस्पॉन्सिबल जर्नलिझमसाठी प्रसिद्ध आहे आणि हेच सकाळची शक्ती आहे. आज मी नॅशनल सिक्युरिटी या विषयावर बोलणार आहे, पण माझ्या सोयीसाठी आणि जे लोक ऑनलाईन बघत आहेत बाकी भारतात वेगळ्या प्रांतात त्यांच्यासुद्धा सोयीसाठी मी ह्या विषयावर जे व्याख्यान आहे ते मी इंग्लिशमध्ये करणार आहे. सो ओव्हर टू इंग्लिश. National security. Before we get on to the subject of national security, it will be worthwhile to quickly cast a mind on what is a nation. Benedict Anderson, a political commentator, had said it is a community, a political community, which has got some shared characteristics. Those characteristics are religion, ethnicity, language, culture and traditions, and a common history. And when this community develops a sense of identity in a given geographical area, then it transforms itself into a nation. But what does this community want, and what are their core values? What are the values that they thrive on? What this community wants is to better their lives. And what are the values, what are the core values that they have? I think that is best encapsulated in the preamble to our Constitution, where it says it is to secure for our citizens justice, liberty, equality, and promote a sense of fraternity for the integrity and unity of the nation. And I feel that these 4 factors, I will repeat them: justice includes social justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. I think these 4 factors should be our guiding beacon in whatever we say and do. But of course, in order to develop To prosper, we need a peaceful environment. But without that, we cannot prosper. And this peaceful environment is required so that everyone can pursue their goals and their ambitions without fear. And they can pursue these goals irrespective of caste, creed, religion, or gender. That should be the aim. And I reiterate that this can only happen if there is a peaceful environment. And if that is there, then we can all grow together and not at the cost of each other. That is the main point. Our Honorable Prime Minister, while speaking at a regional forum a few years ago, had also made this point in the larger construct, and he had called it SAGAR, SAGAR, security and growth for all in the region. If we have to prosper, then all of us have to grow together. When we think of national security, the first thing that comes to our mind is the armed forces. The first thing which comes to our mind are the columns of tanks and guns and the marching contingents going down Rajpath. Yes, the armed forces have an important role to play, but national security has to be viewed with a much larger perspective. Security also includes energy security, water security, health, environment. All these also form a major component of national security. In fact, today's one of the supplements is totally devoted to water security. This just goes to show that security is all encompassing. Of course, maintaining the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country comes first and foremost, because if that is not there, then you cannot have anything else. And to maintain that, the armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, have a major role to play. But apart from that, there are other border guarding forces too. The BSF, ITBP, Assam Rifles, the Coast Guard, to name a few, who also play an equally important role in ensuring the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our nation. Apart from the external factor, internal security also forms part of the overall security calculus. And in this, of course, the central and state police forces have a major role to play. And along with them, the other organs of the government, the other ministries, they also contribute in equal measure to the internal security aspect. So as you see, national security is not the responsibility of the government alone, but it is a whole of nation effort. All of us are involved in ensuring national security. All citizens have a role to play. And that is even more so because of the cross-pollination of the threats which have taken place. They have no longer remained limited to one area. They have transcended geographical and political boundaries. And therefore, there is no clear demarcation between external threats and internal threats. And a very topical example of this is terrorism, which emanates from abroad. The planning is done somewhere. The weapons come from somewhere else. But the manifestation is well in the hinterland, not necessarily on the borders. It just goes to show how threats have transcended all these boundaries. And therefore, all citizens have to be alert, and we have to make sure that we are not allowed any differences amongst ourselves to come to the fore. I had quoted Benedict Anderson, and when I said that who share common characteristics, religion, language, ethnicity, culture, traditions. But India as a nation is so diverse. We all have different backgrounds. We come from different parts of the country, different religions. This diversity can be our strength, is our strength in fact. But this diversity can also be exploited by our adversaries and those who are inimical to our interests. And therefore we have to make sure that the strength of ours, the diversity, the strength in this diversity must remain. And therefore I take your mind back to what I said in the beginning, those core values enshrined in the preamble to our Constitution should remain our guiding beacon. And none of us should do or say anything which weakens us. And in this, of course, the media has a major role to play. But when we talk about national security, it is not inward looking alone. Regional and global factors also have their role to play. If our region is unstable, if our neighbors are unstable, then our borders also become unstable. And that always has a negative fallout on our security. If the borders are unstable or our neighbors are unstable, then there is an inflow of refugees. There is an increase in transnational, trans-border crimes, whether it is gun running, smuggling, drugs, even people smuggling. And all that affects our internal security calculus. So to be stable as a country, we also need to have stable neighbors. And you just have to cast your mind around our immediate neighborhood and you will understand what I am talking about. And in this neighborhood, India stands out as a pillar of stability. And this is something that we all need to be proud of, that India is a net security provider in this region. It's something that we should be vigilant. Events and activities across the globe also cast a spell on our national security. A small insignificant event happening in a corner of the globe can also impact us. This is often referred to as the butterfly effect, was propagated by Edward Lorenz as far back as 1961. You would be surprised to know that the price of tur dal in the Vashi market is dependent on what is happening in countries as far away as Mozambique, Malawi and Venezuela. Because that is where 10 to 15% of our dal comes from. So if there is instability or protests in Venezuela, the price in Vashi goes up. A small insignificant event somewhere which has had an impact on us. So all events, great and small, have their ultimately a fallout. And that fallout impacts national security. A mention was made of the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So I will take that as a backdrop to speak about national security and what lessons we can draw from it. This conflict which is going on is already now in the 6th month. And it has had global reverberations. No one has been spared from this fallout. Commodity prices the world over have gone up from anything between 10 to 30%. No one has been spared. But I will not go into the nitty-gritties of the conflict, who is right, who is wrong, or what strategies are being pursued. But against the background of this conflict, what are the lessons that we learn from the national security perspective? The first and foremost is that wars will happen. After a long period of peace, a feeling starts coming into the populace that wars will not be there. But as events have shown, wars are always just around the corner. And we have to prepare for that. there was a feeling that if countries are economically interdependent and have strong economic linkages, then wars between two such countries will not happen. That has also not been the case. So just because we have strong economic ties with someone doesn't mean that we cannot be adversaries in the future. There was also a feeling that wars will be of very short duration. We'll get over in 14 days' time, 1 month's time. Not so. As I said, it is already in its 6th month. And if wars are not going to be of short duration, then again, from a national security perspective, and as a country, we have to be able to absorb that kind of a shock. Our population, our industries have to be ready to gear up for a long, drawn-out conflict. There was also a feeling that wars in the future will be very synthetic, non-contact. That means adversaries will not see each other, that only missiles will go from one end to the other. But not so. People are fighting hand to hand, in the mud, in the trenches, in the fields. There was a feeling that it will be very sanitized, limited to the realm of cyber warfare and such like activities. But the nature of war has not changed. And that nature of war is violence, blood and gore. So these are some of the lessons which come out immediately against the backdrop of this conflict. But most importantly, another set of lessons. And the first, of course, already mentioned, is the requirement to be self-reliant, Atmanirbhar. That is the biggest lesson that we have to draw. If we are not self-reliant, as Ukraine is not, and they have to depend on imported shipments of arms and ammunition, then you are in for trouble. That is the major lesson, and the fact that when push comes to shove, when wars break out, we will have to fight it alone. Nobody comes to your help. They may give moral support, they may give weapon, but the blood which will be spilled will be ours. The third is the importance of land. And that has always been so through the generations, that land has been what everybody always fights for. There's an Israeli writer, Yuval Noah Harari, who has written a book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind. And in that, he sort of gives an explanation about our attachment to the land. And in that he says that man did not tame the land. He says land tamed man. He posits that as hunter-gatherers, if a bigger tribe or clan came our way, then the smaller or weaker one would move away. Or the two would join hands and become one. So there was no competition. And no competition, therefore no cause for conflict. But when we started investing in the land, when we started tilling it, growing our crops, making our houses on that land, then we had to defend it also from other people. And that is where conflict started. And that is why over the generations, all of us have developed such a deep affinity to the land. And I think all of us know that land has got so much value, and how the disputes, not only between countries, but even amongst ourselves, are over land. 1 inch here and 1 inch there. So that is why land becomes important. And if land has become important, then the centrality of land, of the army, for the conduct of warfare also becomes most paramount. You can bomb a country as much as you want. You can blockade it from all sides using your navy. But ultimately, you have to go and sit there on that land if you have to claim it as your own. What we colloquially say, boots on ground. So in our national security calculus, we will always have to keep this in mind that land warfare will be very important. And in our context, that is even more so because we have unsettled boundaries and adversarial neighbors both to our west and to our north. So land will always be important. But to ensure that security, we also need to have a credible deterrence. If you do not have a credible deterrence, then others will take advantage of you. The fact that a credible deterrent capability has to be built up and the security of the country and the citizens is paramount, there is no doubt in that. There is no doubt also that it is a prime responsibility of the government to ensure that. Defense of the nation takes first charge. First charge means first priority. You have to first decide that you have to defend your country. And only then can you do the other things, which, whether it is health or education or infrastructure, all else follows. But first you have to ensure the defense. But in a developing country such as ours, there will always be a debate between what we call the guns versus butter debate. How much to spend on that defense? That can be debated, but that defense takes first priority. That cannot be wished for. And we have to build that capability to defend our country. Capability and intention are two sides of a coin. And intentions can change overnight. Somebody who is your friend today can become your enemy tomorrow. But capabilities take time to develop, years and decades to develop. And therefore, we need sustained capability development and a sustained budget in order to build up that strength. I think Ukraine neglected this fact, neglected their national security, and now they're paying the price. And they will take years to recover from it. And in fact, the cost of reconstruction, as and when the war ends, whichever way it ends, the cost of reconstruction and the cost of repaying for all the aid that they have received, which will be much more in order of magnitude than had they spent adequately on the defense of the country. So this is something we can ignore only at our own peril. But when we talk about the defense budget, there is a misplaced notion that expenditure on defense is a drain on our finances, on the exchequer. Actually, as you will see, and as I just mentioned, it is actually an investment. Expenditure on defense is an investment on which you get good returns. Just see what happens when there is instability. Straight away, the stock market crashes. If the country is stable, it attracts foreign investment. It attracts more orders. Out of the budget that we get, whatever we spend goes back to the economy. It goes back in terms of raw materials which are bought. It goes back in terms of wages to those who work in those factories. So actually almost everything goes back to the local economy. I would go so far as to say that actually the defense budget sustains our economy. So it should not be seen as a wasteful expenditure. It is far from it. And you can also see it from another point of view as of insurance. Just as we take insurance for ourselves, the expenditure on defense is like a premium for the country. And the more the risk, the more the threats and challenges that we face, obviously more will be the premium. And if we ignore this fact, then once again it is at our own risk and peril. But so far I've been speaking only from an armed forces perspective. But national security is not the prerogative or purview of the armed forces alone. Territorial integrity and sovereignty are important to make sure that the country remains stable so that others can grow and prosper. But it is a whole of nation affair. All of us, every person, every man, woman and child from all walks of life have to contribute to this national effort to make sure that we are safe and secure. And in this too, the media has an important role to play. To give an example of how national security was compromised, cast your minds back to the 27/11 Mumbai attacks, where the media in their over-eagerness broadcasted live what was going on. And by seeing those images, the handlers from across the border on the radio could then pass instructions to the terrorists about what was happening and where it was happening. And because of which countless lives were lost. This is an example of how media can play a negative role too. And therefore, as I mentioned, the need for constructive and responsible journalism, and for which, of course, the Sakal Group is well known for. And if this is a whole of nation effort, and if all of us have a role to play, then we need to change the way we function. We have to shed our old practices, our colonial legacies, and move ahead. The rules and regulations were made to help us, to assist us in moving forward, and were not meant to be impediments. In fact, only 3 or 4 days ago, our Honorable Prime Minister, while speaking at a convocation ceremony in Chennai, highlighted the need for reform in government and said that government needs to be responsive and not restrictive. So we have to change the way we function. We have to focus on the outcomes, what we need to do, and not focus on the process that we follow. And this process that we are following is actually what is holding us back. I would like to take 2 examples from the aviation industry to highlight this point. The first example is about a United Airlines flight from Portland to Denver way back in 1978. And as they were coming in to land, one of the lights in the cockpit indicated a landing gear malfunction. So the pilots abandoned the landing, of course, that was the correct thing to do. And for the next 1 hour or so, tried to figure out what is to be done. They took out each and every manual which was kept in the cockpit. They leafed through it, tried to see what is the correct procedure. But in doing so, they lost sight of the aim. What is the aim? To get the aircraft down